Welcome. Slowly close your eyes and imagine yourself in 1600s Japan. Silence. Everywhere is quiet, except for the gentle sounds of bamboo swaying in the wind. The moon cuts through the sky like a sword, and you are a samurai. Today, you are not an ordinary soldier, but in the body of a warrior who lives with honor, unafraid of death. You greet the morning with sword training, every step measured, every word careful, because a single mistake could mean the end not only for you, but for your family. You are bound to a daimyo. Loyalty is not a choice, but a necessity, and this devotion can sometimes be more valuable than your life. But tonight, there is no war. Your sword rests in the corner, your mind heavy with years of burden. Perhaps you remember an enemy, perhaps an old friend whose honor you sacrificed. Being a samurai is not just about fighting. It's about being ready to die at every moment while alive. Tonight we take you to the invisible sides of being a samurai. Sleepless watches, inner pain, sacrifices made for duty. Now take a deep breath and set out toward the silence of a samurai in ancient Japan. A child's spirit is broken before they grow up. Waking before sunrise is every samurai child's first duty. While your eyes open, you begin training not your body, but your mind. Sluggishness is forbidden. Drowsiness is a flaw. Your wrists may not yet bear the weight of your father's sword, but your mind already carries that burden. If born into samurai lineage in the Edo period, your childhood never truly began. There are no games. Crying is weakness. Even joy is limited. Every morning you must walk barefoot on stones arranged in the garden. Even if your feet bleed, you remain silent. This is discipline's first step. You're only 8, but expected to have adult patience. Your first sword is a wooden bokken. Too early for a real katana, but you carry it like a sacred trust. Your instructor, often your father's friend or another samurai, doesn't shout, only watches. He wants you to understand mistakes with your eyes. Every fall, every wayward strike is a lesson. Every wound, a teacher. At certain times, you're taken to temples to learn meditation, not thinking, emptiness, silencing the mind. Because one day in real battle, you'll face not an enemy, but your own fear. If you cannot defeat your fear, the sword in your hand means nothing. That's why even as a child, you must first win the battle within yourself. Even meals are training. Eating slowly, giving thanks, remaining silent. Speaking at the table is shameful. You don't eat for pleasure, but for duty. Every morsel entering your body increases an obligation within. Playing with other children is almost forbidden. If a child provokes you, you don't respond. But with your instructor's permission, you can teach them a lesson with the sword. This is not violence, but discipline. You become a warrior before you even grow up. Even if your mother loves you, she doesn't embrace you too much, because it's known this child may not return when grown. Love is silent. She places her hand on your hair, but doesn't hold. When seeing you off, she looks into your eyes, but doesn't cry, because she too has been trained. Being a samurai's mother means enduring with patience and silence. At night, you begin seeing war in dreams. Not in battle, but just walking. While walking, enemies suddenly appear. Your hand goes to your sword, but you cannot draw. These nightmares begin in childhood because the perfection expected of you follows you even in sleep. At 12, you're no longer considered a child. Training continues day and night. You learn to move in moonlight, walking without making sound, passing without crushing the leaf. These are a samurai child's first tests. and one mistake can shame not a day, but a lineage. The art of war isn't limited to the sword. Archery, calligraphy, poetry, even tea ceremony are all training. Because a samurai is not only one who kills, but also one who thinks, feels, and measures. But perhaps the hardest training is silence. Not asking questions, not complaining, knowing when to be quiet. That's why samurai children don't talk much, because silence is a discipline as sharp as a sword, and you learn this before you even begin to speak. One day, when training ends, you finally receive your real sword. Not wood, but steel, sharp, cold as death, and heavy. Something you must hold not with your hand, but with your heart. At that moment, you're no longer a child. But you understand better then that you never lived your childhood. Because a samurai's childhood means a life that never truly began. A samurai feels everything, but shows nothing. In Japan's misty mornings, a samurai walking among bamboo forests is silent. Silence is his existence. For a samurai, emotion is something to be swallowed, not displayed. Anger doesn't explode. Sorrow doesn't spill. Even joy is carefully suppressed, because one who carries a sword must first master his own emotions. The punishment for emotion is not given with slaps or shouts. In the samurai world, punishment is silence. If you make a mistake, your master only looks at you, but says nothing. This is the most painful punishment, not being spoken to, being ignored, and you must search within yourself for what you did. If you cried as a child, your voice is suppressed. You're taught to be ashamed of your tears. Because in samurai culture, it's not suffering that's acceptable, but enduring pain silently. This applies not only to boys. Female samurai receive the same discipline. Emotions are considered weakness on the battlefield, and this weakness can put at risk not just you, but the clan you belong to. When you lose someone, instead of tears, you clean your sword. You don't show mourning, but carve a nameless mark on a stone. Perhaps you leave a small flower, then continue walking. Because stopping, getting stuck in the past, prepares ground for the enemy. Honor commands moving forward. When you fall in love, this is the greatest test. For a samurai, love is a secret that must never be spoken. Showing your love softens your face, and a softened face is seen as weakness. Weakness means death. That's why watching your beloved from afar, sometimes risking death for them, but never saying, "I love you," is one of a samurai's internal conflicts. On nights before battle, most samurai cannot sleep, but none say they cannot sleep. Bodies are in meditation, eyes closed, but storms rage inside. Because a samurai is also human, and humans fear when awaiting death. But even this fear is not voiced. Speaking of fear means magnifying it, so everyone remains alone with their own darkness. Some samurai apply this silence to themselves as punishment. For months, they don't speak with anyone. They only work, fight, and think. This is the way to face oneself, because much happens in the outer world, but more turns in the inner world, and a samurai must first win his own internal war. Even a samurai who has been betrayed doesn't shout. He just turns, stands still, and does what's necessary, because shouting means opening the heart to the enemy. The greatest betrayal of emotion is showing it to your enemy. So the strongest samurai is the one whose face remains calm, even while a storm rages inside. For samurai, even tea ceremony is a ritual to suppress emotions. Your hands must not tremble when holding the cup. Your eyes must not drift when sipping. Words must be balanced when speaking. Every movement is a technique to negate internal emotion. That's why samurai faces are mostly unreadable. They don't reveal what they think or feel. They don't smile, don't frown. But their hearts fill and overflow. No one can see that overflow. Sometimes, when leaning alone against a tree trunk, only the leaves hear the tears flowing from within. And finally, when the sword is drawn for the last time, there is still silence on that samurai's face. Even death doesn't bring him emotion, because he learned as a child, feeling is not a crime, but for a samurai, showing feeling is unforgivable. Loyalty is not a command, but a form of death. A samurai doesn't just fight, he also obeys. But this is not blind obedience. It's surrender of a soul, dedication of a life. In Japan's feudal structure, every samurai has a daimyo to whom he is bound, a landlord, a protector, and a judge. His word is not law, it's beyond that. It's fate. If, as a samurai, the person you'll serve is determined when you open your eyes, your personal decisions end, because you're no longer an individual, but a command. You're expected to act with a glance, withdraw with silence. Loyalty is the heaviest word here, because serving alone is not enough. What's essential is accepting to die, even for his mistakes when necessary, expecting nothing in return. The daimyo's enemy is your enemy. Whether he is right or wrong is not discussed. When he gives an order, questioning the moral consequences is not for you. Even if the mistake is his, the shame is yours. That's why samurai sometimes knowingly walk paths leading to death, because the real issue is not living, it's completing loyalty without stain. Loyalty is tested not only in war, but in peace. For many samurai, the hardest period is when there is no war, because then orders decrease, expectations become abstract, and the internal void breeds doubt from loyalty. Even in these silent periods, being able to remain bound to the daimyo is the measure of a true samurai. When you make a mistake, this brings shame to the daimyo. Even small disrespect erases years of service in one night. In such situations, most samurai present their apology not with words, but with seppuku, a form of silent farewell where the samurai expresses internal shame outwardly, reaffirms his loyalty with his life. A samurai serving a daimyo can never tarnish his name, because even if the samurai dies, his name continues to live. The family proud of this name, enemies who fear it, servants who whisper it. If that name gets stained, not only you, but everyone remaining from your family carries that burden. In some cases, the daimyo makes wrong decisions. He starts a war but loses. Some samurai continue their duties despite these orders, knowing this path will end in death. But what they leave behind is not life, but a trace, a line drawn with loyalty. Because in Japanese culture, some deaths speak louder than living. Samurai make small gestures to show devotion, swords bearing the daimyo's name, armor worked with symbols, loyalty oaths to the dynasty's crest. But underlying all external signs is an internal philosophy. I do not exist. He exists. For a samurai, loyalty is a state of mind, unquestioning trust, unconditional surrender, unrequited sacrifice. In the modern world, this thought may be difficult to understand, but for a samurai, this is a form of existence, and sometimes, even the account of one breath is given to the daimyo. If one day your daimyo dies, the greatest test begins. Some follow him to his grave. Some take on another duty to keep his memory alive. But the heaviest oath is this: I served while he lived. Now even in his death I will protect his honor. Some laws are not written in books, but carved into bones. For a samurai, Bushido is not just a list of rules. It's like breathing. Invisible, but everything begins and ends with it. In Japan's centuries-old silence, every step a samurai walks, every look he carries, every bow he makes is the echo of this invisible law. Bushido means the way of the warrior, but this path is drawn not with blood, but with honor. For one who carries a sword, defeating the enemy is not enough. He must also defeat himself, because the hardest victory is won against internal weaknesses. That's why Bushido is about not just war, but life. The first step of this path begins with gi, righteousness, knowing what is right and choosing it in every situation. Not the easy, not the expected, but the right. This can be exposing a lie, reporting betrayal, or silently withdrawing. Righteousness is the samurai's first mirror. Second comes you, courage. But this is not reckless foolishness. It's the ability to act despite fear of death. A samurai fears, but walks despite his fear. Because courage is not fearlessness, but befriending fear. The measure of courage is not when drawing the sword, but in the hesitation before drawing. Jin, compassion, is the softness within the sword. A samurai is strong, but not cruel. He can kill an enemy, but never humiliates. He doesn't scold a servant. He uses his power not to protect power, but to serve. Compassion is the samurai's heart as sharp as his sword. Rei, respect, is hidden in a greeting. Every bow, every speech, every glance is a sign of respect. Respect for oneself, one's enemy, the elderly. Nature is a boundary even war cannot tarnish. A samurai delivers even the final blow to his enemy with respect, because honor is above victory. Makoto, honesty, is the honor of one's word. When you say, quote, 2, you do it. When you say, quote, 3, you come. Because for a samurai, a word is as powerful as a written order. Not lying, even diminishing honesty, is dishonorable. Meiyo, honor, is the quietest but heaviest principle. When lost, it cannot be regained. That's why a samurai doesn't fear death, but fears dishonor. For a samurai, shame is a weight carried in the heart, but never expressed outwardly. If honor is stained, the body goes. That's why it's a rule, abandoning life to protect honor. And finally comes chugi, words given to the daimyo, family, clan. Loyalty is like a rope, invisible but holds everything together. Disloyalty is turning one's back, not just on betrayal, but on the meaning of life. Bushido's rules are not written on paper. Every samurai doesn't see them, but feels them in their marrow. That's why when a mistake is made, there's no shouting or confrontation, just looking into the eyes, and he already knows. Because a samurai's conscience is sharper than external judgment. Walking this path is not easy. Mistakes are not forgiven. Victories are not exaggerated. One day you're a hero. The next you can fall from grace. But what matters is not the external echo, but the internal silence. If a samurai can sleep with his own conscience, he is faithful to Bushido. Over time, the world changed. Castles fell, empires collapsed, but Bushido remained. Even today, the order on a Japanese businessman's desk, the angle of bowing when greeting, the measure in speech, are all traces of this ancient path. And one day, when a samurai takes his last breath, he still doesn't speak. He closes his eyes, places his hands on his knees, because he knows if you lived your life with Bushido, your death is also honorable. Looking at Japan's long history, some deaths were lived silently. No screaming, no tears, no lament. Just kneeling, closing eyes, a knife appears, and a person seals his fate with his own hands. This is not suicide, but a stance, a form of honor. This is seppuku. Seppuku is also known in the West as harakiri, but this term stays on the surface. Its true meaning is only reached in Japan's stone-silent past. Seppuku is a samurai opening his own heart, both literally and spiritually. Because when a samurai's honor is damaged, he cannot continue living. And punishment doesn't come from another's hand. He applies the punishment himself. Because no one can understand a samurai's honor as much as he does. Seppuku is a ritual. Everything happens within certain rules. First, clean kimono is worn, usually white, symbolizing purity, surrender, and purification. The environment is silent. There may be a few people around. The closest friend or master takes on the role of kaishakunin, the assistant who will cut the head. Because seppuku is done by opening the abdomen, but so the pain doesn't last long, the neck is cut immediately afterward. The samurai sits kneeling. Before him stands a short knife, a tanto or wakizashi. Hands don't tremble. There's no fear on the face, only acceptance. Because this is an end thought about and internalized for long years. Dying by your own decision is more honorable than living by another's decision, says Bushido. When grasping the knife, all life's burden flows into that hand. The first cut is made from right to left. Opening the abdomen, touching the body's center, is actually laying bare the soul. When a samurai makes this movement, he experiences not regret, but inner peace, because he knows this final act is a purification. Then the kaishakunin lowers the sword from behind. The neck doesn't break, because breaking would be disrespectful. The head remains connected to the body by skin, and this means a completed seppuku. So when was seppuku performed? Most often after a mistake. Samurai whose duties ended in failure thought continuing to live would stain honor. Sometimes after their lord's death to show loyalty. Sometimes as a silent protest in political games. But each time this was not death, but a decision. Sometimes seppuku is accompanied by a letter expressing the samurai's thoughts, feelings, and regrets. But most often, these notes are brief. Because long explanations are self-defense, and a samurai doesn't defend himself, he only surrenders. Seppuku was not exclusive to men. There was also a female version known as jigai. Samurai women would resort to this path with the same surrender to avoid falling into enemy hands or to protect family honor. They too were silent. They too were brave. In the modern world, this ritual is incomprehensible because today life is sanctified and death avoided. But for a samurai, the issue is not living. It's how one lives and how one ends. Seppuku is not desperation, but a demonstration of will. And that's why, even centuries later, this act is remembered with respect. Today, no samurai remain, but some names are remembered not only for how they lived, but how they died. Because sometimes a person leaves a mark not with their life, but with their farewell. And samurai become most themselves at that moment of farewell. A samurai walks, leaving silence behind. On Japan's winding mountain paths, as morning's first light washes over, a man walks with heavy steps. Katana in hand, shoulder bag on back, a silent heart within. He doesn't look back. Because for a samurai, the greatest test is saying goodbye. But this farewell happens neither with shouting nor crying, just a glance, a bow, a silence that seems like nothing, but tells everything. A samurai loves his family, his wife, children, mother, father, but his love is not spoken, because Bushido prioritizes not emotions, but duty. When duty calls, a samurai doesn't stop, because loyalty is devotion not just to the daimyo, but to the path. And this path sometimes separates you from those you love most. For a samurai, marriage is not comfort, but responsibility. His wife is proud of him, but farewell is always ready. Because one morning when she opens her eyes, her husband may have gone silently, without leaving a trace. Because going to duty often means never returning. That's why samurai live separations not with ceremony, but habit. Children cannot memorize their father's face. Every meeting is short, every touch limited. But as those children grow, they learn the path their father walked. And one day, they walk the same path with the same silence. This cycle is passed not with blood, but honor, from generation to generation. Sometimes a duty can last years. Samurai sent to distant lands by a daimyo's order cannot receive news even by letter from their families, because a letter is weakness. The desire to return clouds the samurai's mind, so breaking away is necessary. Being one with duty, being nothing with family is hardest but most sacred. Farewells are lived not at home but in the heart. When a samurai leaves his home, he only bows to his wife. The woman averts her eyes but places her hand on her heart, because both know this is not farewell but sacrifice. What they dedicate their lives to is beyond being together. This is the loneliness of being a samurai, a life that loves silently, leaves silently, is remembered silently. Some samurai return, but when they return, nothing is as they left it. Children have grown, wife has aged, home has gone silent. Because war swallows not just bodies, but time. And a returning samurai often feels he hasn't returned. Because what he left on the road is not just his family, but his old self. Samurai women also experience similar loneliness. They too are on duty. The duty of waiting, praying, staying strong. Every night there's emptiness on one side of the bed. Every meal is eaten with someone missing. But they don't cry, because being a samurai's wife requires enduring like a warrior. Some farewells are heavier. A samurai going to seppuku leaves a letter for his family, but the letter is brief. My path ends here. You continue with honor. And those left behind let their tears flow inwardly, because crying after a samurai is like showing him as weak. That's why much silence wanders Japan's stone roads. That silence is the echo of those lost. Years later, a samurai's child finds his father's sword. The handle is worn, but the sword shines. Because duty has been completed, honor has been protected, and the child bows in greeting to the father he never fully knew. In this greeting, love, longing, respect, and legacy come together. A samurai doesn't sleep. He listens to the night's breath. Before rain begins, the air goes silent. The sky darkens, but the storm hasn't arrived yet. For a samurai, this is the moment requiring most attention, because the enemy doesn't always come shouting, sometimes silent as a leaf rustling, sometimes close as a breath. In the countryside of Japan, at a small castle built at the foot of a mountain, a samurai on watch knows rain is coming from its smell. Earth grows heavy, bamboo branches close in, air becomes humid. The sword hilt in his hands becomes slightly slippery. Rain hasn't started yet, but preparation within has already begun. Watch is one of samurai life's quietest but most difficult duties. There is no war, no sound, but threat hangs in the middle of everything. Waiting, standing silently, observing before acting. A samurai fights not only with the enemy, but with his own impatience. As night advances, wind picks up. The face of the samurai keeping watch in the tower is kneaded by wind. Eyes narrow but don't close. Ears become accustomed to sound. Every tone coming in wind, every whisper is carefully distinguished, because for a samurai, an enemy approaching unnoticed can be as deadly as his own distraction. Rain begins. The first drop falls on his shoulder, then the second, and then the sky opens. Now watch turns from a physical to spiritual test. Clothes become heavy, breath fogs, hair sticks to forehead, but the body doesn't move from its place, because duty is not finished, and a samurai doesn't move until duty is complete. Some nights are long, hours pass but nothing happens. Then the samurai's mind begins to turn inward. Is there really a threat today? The question wanders in his mind. The answer doesn't matter. Because samurai life is bound not to what should be, but doing what must be done. Whether there's threat or not, he will wait in that tower, even if rain swallows him, even if lightning strikes. Watch is loneliness. But this loneliness is not frightening. On the contrary, it's a teacher. Because when alone, a samurai hears himself, his inner voice, his weaknesses, mistakes made in the past, and learns to stand with all of these. That's why nights are important. They're war's silent teacher. Sometimes you don't keep watch alone. You stand shoulder to shoulder with another samurai, but you don't speak. Speaking disperses attention. The bond between you is established not with words, but stance. You hear each other's breath, reach for the sword at the same time, and continue waiting in the same silence. Memories come with wind, a friend's death, eyes of a comrade going to seppuku, voice of the child left at home. These memories are as sharp as cold. But the samurai doesn't stop. Because his internal war is deeper than external enemy. Toward morning, rain stops. Sky turns gray. A rooster's sound is heard in the distance. Duty has ended, but the samurai doesn't immediately descend from his tower. First he checks his sword, wipes his hands, then slowly descends, and there's not a single expression on his face. Because he has only done his duty. He expects neither praise nor thanks. This is his path, his night. For a samurai, the greatest victory is reaching morning. He has neither fought an enemy nor spilled blood, but he has prevailed against impatience, fatigue, hopelessness within. A samurai kills but never humiliates. A sword strike can split not just a body but a life, a past, an honor in two. That's why a samurai doesn't swing his sword randomly. Because for him, killing is not pleasure, but duty. But even that duty must be performed with respect. In old stories told in Japan's mountain villages, there's always the same scene. Two samurai face each other. Wind tosses bamboo leaves. Birds fall silent. Earth breathes silently. And that moment lasts only a second. But within this second lie years of training, silent agreement, and deep respect. Before fighting, samurai bow to each other. This is not greeting the enemy, but recognizing the opponent's humanity. The one across from you is not just a beast. He too has loved ones, memories, fears, dreams. And if you're going to kill him, you must do so not with contempt, but understanding. Because honor is not lost even in death. Many samurai don't refuse when invited to duel, but never request duel to humiliate. They don't call to provoke, belittle, or show off, but to settle accounts. And this settling is a moment when not just swords, but hearts also weigh heavy. When battle begins, the samurai draws his sword but doesn't shout, doesn't show off, just waits. Focuses on opponent's move, attention, breath. Every strike is respect because it shows you take him seriously. If you underestimate your opponent, you also diminish your own honor. Sometimes the enemy falls to the ground, loses his weapon, and the samurai lowers his sword but doesn't kill. Because victory comes not only with killing, but with being able to forgive. Seeing the enemy's power and accepting his defeat is enough. This leaves the opponent not life, but honor. Still, if battle is inevitable, the samurai kills but quickly, without causing pain. Because death is not punishment, but a result, and even that result must have a form, a grace. That's why most samurai greet their opponent even at the moment of death. Saying, "I fought with an honorable enemy," is a source of pride. Some samurai write to the family of the opponent they killed. Not apology, but a declaration of respect. Your son fought bravely. He died without his honor being tarnished. I want you to know this. These letters touch the hearts of those left behind, because respect is shown even after death. A samurai sets down his sword, but his soul's sharpness continues in the temple. A warrior's greatest victory is sometimes not in defeating an enemy, but in being able to silence the noise within himself. In Japan, in a wooden temple hidden among mountains, at night there is only the sound of wind. Located in the heart of tranquility, this temple is a place where there is no sword sound, where one kneels and breathes silently. Here, the samurai wages his true battle with his own inner self. In the temple, there is no speaking, because words are always inadequate. Teachings are received not with eyes or ears, but with heart. Priests wake before sunrise. Incense is burned. Floors are cleaned. The samurai also joins this routine. But here there are no orders, no duties. Just existing is enough. Because at the end of Bushido stands not the sword, but spiritual balance. As sharp as a samurai is on the battlefield, he is that still in the temple. Because here there is no opponent, no reward. Breaths are counted. Every step is taken carefully. Tea is drunk without spilling. The purpose of everything is to be aware. And this awareness is the quietest form of honor. Samurai don't pray in the temple, at least not in the sense we know. They join their hands but don't request from gods. They just listen. Not to the sound of the outside world, but to echoes of the confusion within. Because screams unheard in war find echo here. Some samurai withdraw to the temple after years-long duties. No one sends them. No one says enough. But they know however sharp a sword is, it must be sharpened that often. The soul is the same. And the place that sharpens is silence. On temple walls, there is no writing. Ceilings are plain, floor is stone. But within this simplicity hides deep majesty, because the temple grows not with display, but with emptiness. During meditation, a candle burns. The samurai closes his eyes. Back straight, hands on knees. Time flows, but he is fixed. Outside, rain may fall, a storm may break, but in his inner world, there is only a lake's reflection, waveless, clear. This state is called satori, awakening. And this awakening comes not with sword, but with silence. At the temple, the samurai doesn't draw his sword, but sharpens it in his mind every day. Because inner peace is not preparation for war. It's understanding that a life without war is possible. And this understanding comes after years of struggle. Because peace is not victory's, but maturity's gift. Sharpness is not just in steel, but in heart. A katana resembles its bearer. When a samurai opens his eyes in the morning, there's only one thing he looks at before the sky: the katana. Perhaps it stands silently in its sheath. Perhaps it's been polished in preparation for a battle morning. But in any case, it's there, silent, patient, and powerfully without being noticed. A katana is not just a weapon. It's a samurai's identity, extension of his heart, mirror of his intention, trace of his past. Forged in master hands, kneaded with steel after being watered for days, shaped with patience, it's a life. Each of 3 layers of steel carries a meaning. In one hides patience, in one anger, in one love. And all these emotions unite in the katana's curve. That's why samurai treat it as much more than an object. They look at it, clean it, greet it, because they know the katana can turn not just to enemy, but to owner. Owning a katana is not owning power. The real issue is controlling that power. A katana can be sharp, but if the heart is dull, it's directionless. Your hand shouldn't tremble, but if your intention is murky, even the most correct strike can be unjust. That's why samurai with every sword-drawing fight, not just with an enemy, but with their own souls. An old samurai says, quote, 8. At that moment, the samurai places his katana before him, places his hands on his knees, takes a deep breath, and looks silently at the katana, as if a friend, a confidant, because this steel he's carried for years is no longer an object, but a soul. Respecting it is actually respecting one's own past, decisions, mistakes, victories. Cleaning the sword is not just a physical ritual, but also purifying the soul. With every dust wiped, one more crumb is left inside, because the katana doesn't forget the past. It reminds every bearer silently, gently. For a samurai, an order is indisputable. With a daimyo's word, a sword is drawn. With his signal, life is given. Loyalty is a samurai's backbone, the power that straightens him, keeps him standing, determines his direction. But what if the given order conflicts with the heart's voice? What if loyalty and conscience stand at 2 opposite ends? Then for a samurai, the greatest war begins. And this war is waged not with sword, but with heart. That night, the castle was silent. The sky gray, wind dry, and the news it carried was heavy. A young samurai was sitting on his knees. His daimyo was across from him, the man he had served for years, before whom he trembled with a glance, before whom he had bowed since childhood. This time in his eyes was not pride but weight, and his voice was more hoarse than usual. Quote 9, he said. Him, meaning the samurai's closest friend, the brother-like warrior they had sworn in the same blood, fought together, kept watch shoulder to shoulder at night. The reason was clear: suspicion of betrayal. Perhaps it was true, perhaps not, but an order had been given. And now the young samurai, without lifting his hands from his knees, bowed his head. Though his lips didn't move, in his mind turned a single sentence: loyalty or conscience. Loyalty was the first lesson he was taught. Don't question, execute. He had internalized this motto for years. Conscience was a voice that came later, silent but stubborn. That night he withdrew to his room, placed his katana before him, closed his eyes, took a breath. Was thinking a weakness for a samurai like him? Or was true courage not ceasing to think? The next morning, the person standing across from him knelt. The samurai brought his hand to his sword but didn't draw. The man across looked into his eyes. Quote, 10, he said. But in these words was not challenge but surrender. Right then the samurai swallowed, because this was a war waged not against his enemy, but against his own loyalty oath. Now he slowly drew his sword. Light reflected on steel. Everyone fell silent. Eyes met, and suddenly the samurai put the sword back in its sheath. Quote, 11, he said. Quote, 12. This word didn't echo on castle walls, but opened a deep crack in a samurai's soul. That day, the daimyo turned his back on him. The castle didn't accept him, but as the samurai left through that door, he felt light for the first time. Because this time, he was a true samurai, not because he didn't kill someone, but because he won the war within with honor. Some stories, even when they end, are not considered completely finished, because they carry a soul that time cannot erase, words cannot fully describe. And samurai were remembered not only because they fought, only lived, or only died. They left traces, deep, invisible, traces heavy enough that even stone cannot bear. Today, we don't know most of their names. Neither their gravestones remain, nor the words they said. But still, somewhere inside us, they live. When we hesitate in making a decision, when we swallow our anger, when we lower our eyes and remain silent with honor, right at that moment, a samurai's heart beats again with us. Because true samurai life is hidden not in flashy armor, but in silent stance. Perhaps swords fell silent, but that silence became echo, and this echo still beats in time's heart. A true warrior leaves his deepest mark not with his sword, but by remaining silent, being patient, forgiving, when necessary, not leaving, when necessary, never returning. A samurai doesn't live to be understood, and most often leaves without being understood. But one day, a child acts justly. A youth chooses silence. A man pushes away dishonorable gain with the back of his hand. Right then, one more samurai is reborn. Samurai life is not a title remaining in the past. It's a spirit growing even within us today. This spirit doesn't always carry a sword, but always carries balance. Lanterns go out, night ends. But decisions made in that lantern's light give direction to morning. Perhaps you no longer have a katana in hand. Perhaps you're not guarding a castle door. But now you know what you carry. That burden's name is honor, patience, responsibility. Being a samurai is not appearing, but knowing how to not appear when necessary. Choosing what's right where no one sees. Being able to remain yourself not when eyes are on you, but when no one looks. Perhaps you can't win wars, but you don't lose yourself. And precisely for this reason, these stories are written not just to the past, but to today and tomorrow. Now you can close your eyes, because now, even when awake, you think like a samurai. And sometimes the highest sound is the silence left without saying anything. Good night.